Good morning, church. Terry was a single mom from Billings, Montana. She had 3 kids and just never enough money to pay near all the bills, which happens a lot today. And it led to her being very discouraged and depressed. And because of that, she was sitting in a dark closet and she was expecting to end her life there. In her final act of desperation, she cried out to God. She said, if for some reason you don't want me to end my life right here, right now, you need to do something. That very moment, her son burst through the front door of their home crying out, Mama, Mama, look what I got. Terry, she dried her eyes and crawled out of that dark closet to meet her son. He was holding a small Bible that he received at school that day through a Gideon Bible distribution. Terry and her son, they opened that Bible together and they began a journey of faith. I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to share here in your worship service this morning. And thank you for singing that song about the good old book. Yep. Because the Gideons for over 120 years have been distributing Bibles so men, women, boys, and girls can read about Jesus. And since 1908, the Gideons have distributed over 2.6 billion Bibles just for the last fiscal year. The Gideons, with the Lord's help, distributed over 60 million Bibles. It's hard to comprehend how many that is, a big number like that. I'd like to make it a little easier for you to understand just how many that is. Every time your heart beats, the Gideons have distributed on the average of more than 2 Bibles. We're familiar with the Great Commission, Acts 1:8, which says, and ye shall be witnesses unto me both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the uttermost parts of the earth. And the Gideons tried to do that by printing Bibles in over 100 languages and distributed them in over 200 countries. As we distribute the Bible, several favorite verses of the Gideons are Isaiah chapter 40, verse 8, which says, the grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the word of God, it stands forever. And Isaiah chapter 55, verse 11 tells us that God's word does not return void. As I shared those statistics with you, they give us a picture of the size and outreach of the Gideon ministry. But it's the testimonies that change lives, that touch our hearts and inspire us and challenge us in the Gideon ministry. Robert came from a dysfunctional family. He began to use drugs and alcohol at an early age, and it led to him spending some time in prison. And after 18 years of drug and alcohol abuse, Robert found himself living under a bridge, sleeping in a cardboard box, and getting his food out of garbage cans. And after a while, he said, you know, this isn't worth it. Life isn't worth it at all. So he thought he would use the few dollars that he had in his pocket, which was the only money he had left to his name anymore, and he'd check into a hotel, and there in the room he'd check into a hotel room. And there in that hotel room during the night, he was cleaning out his pockets, and he found a piece of paper which someone had given him one time, which said, if you're desperate, just call this number. So Robert thought, well, there can't be anyone any more desperate than I am, so he called the number, and the person that answered the phone said, you go and open the nightstand drawer, and there you'll find a Bible. And Robert thought, how could anyone know what's in the nightstand drawer here in this room? But Robert, he went and he opened the dresser drawer, and there he found the Bible that the Gideons had placed there. And Robert, he took that Bible out and he began to read it. And as he was reading that Bible, he realized his need for God, and he gave his heart to Jesus. And today, Robert and his wife have several ministries for people that are homeless and suffering from drug addiction. Hebrews 4:12 tells us that God's word is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword. John Price was with his parents in a hotel room in Miami, Florida. And John's parents were alcoholics. His mother had already passed out drunk in the bed, and his dad was bar hopping for the night. And Johnny watched TV for a little while, but he started to get really bored, so he thought he would explore around the room to see what he could find. And he went and opened the dresser drawer, and there too he found the Bible that the Gideons had placed there. And John's parents were also atheists, and they said, "Son, don't you ever open a Bible because all you'll find is fairy tales." But John, he was a teenager, and he was curious to just what he might find. And he opened that Bible up, and he found Psalms 42:10, which says, when my mother and my father forsake me, the Lord will take care of me. And Johnny slammed that Bible shut, and he said, "That's books for me." And he put it in his suitcase, and he took it along home, and he hid it under his bed so his parents wouldn't find it. Whenever they weren't around, John was reading that Bible. And as he was reading that Bible, he realized his need for God, and he too gave his heart to Jesus. And today, John is a pastor serving in Virginia, all because of that Bible that he found there in that hotel room. And that's what the Gideons are most known for. I'm sure if you've done any traveling, you've probably seen one in the room where you stay for the night. I have a lot of people that tell me that when they check into a room, they look for the Bible to see if the Gideons are doing their job. One church that I was at, the pastor, he raised his hand and he said, I'm one of those people, and maybe you are too. There's Bibles placed in more than 40,000 hotels in the United States as well as around the world. I had a man share with me that he was on a business trip in China, and there in a hotel room in China, he even found the Bible that the Gideons had there in that hotel room. That's surprising that you would find a Bible in a hotel room in China. I had a lady share with me. She said, when you find that Bible in the hotel room, it makes you feel safe. And another lady share with me, she said, when we travel, she said, we don't pack a Bible. We know the Gideons will have one in the room where you stay for the night. She had a lot of confidence in the Gideons. But that's not all that the Gideons do. In fact, that accounts for only 20% of the Bibles that are being distributed today. And I'd just like to share with you where more than 80% of the Bibles are being distributed. Bibles are being placed in hospitals. It was a little harder to do over COVID, but the Bibles are getting back in the hospitals again. And I had a lady share with me, she said the first Bible that she ever seen in her life was when she was in the hospital at 9 years of age with a serious leg infection. She said, we didn't have a Bible in our home. And she said there was a Bible laying there on the table beside her bed. And she picked that Bible up and she began to read it. And she said she liked what she read so much, and she took that Bible along home. She was hoping the Gideons didn't care. But because of that Bible, she became a Christian, a very active person in her local home, in her local church. Bibles are also placed in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. I spoke at a church where there was a man sitting right in the front row. And the pastor came up to me after the service. He said, "Did you see that man that was sitting there in the front row?" He said, "I worked for 3 years to get that man here to church, but he said he wouldn't come." He said he wasn't interested at all in coming to church. But he said that man, he broke his leg and he went to assisted living facility for therapy. And while he was there, he started to read the Bible that the Gideons had placed there. He said when that man moved back home, he said he started to attend church here. He said that man hasn't missed a church service in over 2 years. And the Sunday I was there, he even helped to take up the offering. And to add a little drama to the story, the pastor said one Sunday we had a big snowstorm. He said that man wanted to get to church so bad he rode his bicycle in a big snowstorm to get to church. Bibles are also placed in doctors and dentist offices and medical offices in our county. That's done by the Ladies Auxiliary, the wives of the Gideon members. My wife helped to distribute Bibles to the offices there in our county. Most military people have the opportunity to receive a Bible. Since 1941, the Gideons have distributed more than 50 million Bibles to military people. I was at a church in Philadelphia, and when I said that, the people started to clap. In my travels, I've had numerous elderly gentlemen tell me how that they received the Bible when they joined the military. And a man shared with me, he said, when I joined the Marines, he said the Gideons gave me a Bible, and he said I still have that Bible, and that was over 50 years ago. Bibles are distributed in schools. I spoke at a church where the pastor got up, and he said, it's Gideon Sunday. He said, I'd just like to tell you. He said, when I was at home growing up, he said, we didn't have a Bible in our home. The only Bible we had was a family Bible, and he said no one was allowed to touch that. But he said the Gideons came to my school and they gave each one of us a Bible. And he said some of my buddies, he said that didn't mean anything to them. They threw theirs in the trash can. But he said that Bible meant everything to me. He said I read that Bible so much that some of the pages were even getting thin. And because of that Bible, he became a Christian, and he was a pastor there at that church that day. Bibles are distributed in colleges and universities. Last fall, we distributed over 4,000 Bibles at the campus of Penn State University, and distributions are held at most colleges and universities here in Pennsylvania. Bibles are also distributed in prisons to our prisoners. I had a man share with me. He said, please remember to tell the people how the Gideons distribute Bibles in our prisons. He said he worked in the prison system of our country for over 30 years, and he said he saw thousands of Bibles being distributed in the prisons to the prisoners by the Gideons. When we hear where Bibles are being distributed, you know, in our country we take a lot of things for granted. And one of the things that we take for granted is having a Bible. I received a Bible when I wasn't very old, and probably many of you did also. And I've read that the average Christian household has 9 Bibles in it. And some of you might even have more Bibles than that in your homes. I had a pastor share with me, he said, I think the Bibles that I have in my church, or have in my study, and Bibles that I have at home, I probably have more than 40 Bibles. Most of us, I don't think, have quite that many, but we do have a lot of Bibles. And we just take them for granted. In more than 48 of the countries where the Gideons are organized in, their GDP is so low that they struggle to survive. And they will never even have a Bible unless one is given to them, one is supplied. And there's a real desire for people to just get a Bible. There was a lady in Papua New Guinea. She only had a couple pages that were torn out of one of her friend's Bibles to read, and she was praying if she could just get a whole Bible to read. And when the Gideons gave her a Bible, she said, it's a miracle that I finally have a whole Bible to read. The Gideons wanted to distribute Bibles at a school in Ghana, and they say the roads aren't very good in that country, and they took a 4-wheel drive vehicle to get there to that school, and it took a lot longer for them to get there than what they thought. And when they got there to the school, the students had already gone home for the day, and they were very discouraged that the students had already gone home. But the teachers, they were still there, and they came running out, and they said, don't worry, we'll get the students back. And they began to ring the school bell, and there at the dusty playground, over 600 students lined up. And the Gideons gave each one of them a Bible, which they gladly received. And the teacher said after the distribution, we were praying for weeks and months for someone to come and give our students that book that tells about Jesus. I'd just like to give you a few examples of many that I could give you of the needs for Bibles throughout the world. In the country of India, with a population of 1.4 billion people, 17% of the world's population, it's estimated that less than 6% of the people there in India are Christians. And Bibles are being distributed there in the country of India at the rate of over 1 million Bibles every month. I'm no real good mathematician, but I do know that distributing Bibles at the rate of 1 million Bibles every month, it'll take a long time to get Bibles to 1.4 billion people. In the region of Asia, made up of 13 countries, there's a population of around 717 million people. And it's estimated that 90% of those people profess either Buddhism, Islam, or Hinduism. The Gideons have been working there in that region starting in the country of Hong Kong in 1957. And now in those 13 countries, there's over 8,000 Gideons, and so far they have distributed over 30 million Bibles to those 717 million people. We believe now, with the desire for people to get a Bible and the great need for Bibles, that now is a very important time for Bible distribution. When we consider the conditions around the world, and I try not to be pessimistic, but even the conditions right here in our own country, it might be as important time as ever in history for Bible distribution. John 4:35 is a familiar verse which says, "Lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white, all ready for harvest." And I'd just like to share with you how that you could help and be an important part of the Gideon ministry. The first way that you could help and be an important part is by praying. We need more prayer warriors to pray for open doors and open hands to distribute the Bibles. The Gideons have a goal for this fiscal year, which just started on June 1st, that they would like to distribute over 71 million Bibles. So we covered your prayers, knowing that James 5:16 tells us that the prayer of a righteous man availeth much. The second way that you could help and be important part of our ministry is by supporting us financially. Every Bible that we distribute is made possible by the people who support our ministry. And it takes a lot of money to print and ship that many Bibles. After a church service, Amy, she walked up to the Gideon and she gave him a $5 bill. And she said, I know it's not very much, but she said, that's all I can do. And $5 doesn't seem like very much today. Doesn't buy very much at all. There at one time, $5 wouldn't even buy a dozen of eggs. But what I would like to tell you, that $5 will buy one of these larger Bibles that you would find in a hotel room or is given out in the prisons to the prisoners. And $5 will buy almost 4 of these small Bibles that are given out at school distributions or are given to the military people. While $5 doesn't seem like very much to us, if it places a Bible in a person's hands, it could change your life. And I'd like to remind you what most people like to hear about with the Gideons. When money's given to the Gideons, it can go toward Bibles because administrative costs are covered by the dues that we pay. So when money's given to the Gideons, it can go toward Bibles. I'd just like to call your attention to these handouts. In these handouts, you can read more about the Gideons at your convenience. There's more testimonies that I'm sure you would enjoy reading about of people whose lives have been changed because of the Bible that they received. And I'd also like to call your attention to these envelopes. If you would like to use one of them and make a donation to the Gideons, you could put it in that envelope and it would get to where it needs to go. And also I'd like to remind you about the cards that the Gideons have. You have a card display back there in the back of your church here, and maybe some of you don't even know about the cards, but the purpose of those cards is twofold. You can send them and encourage a person in need, and you can also make a donation to the Gideons at the same time. The memory card is the most popular, and you can donate Bibles in memory of someone that you know that passed away. The Gideon International Headquarters is in Nashville, Tennessee, and they receive many thank you letters from people around the world whose lives have been changed because of a Bible that they received. Tim wrote that he was in Taiwan staying in a hotel on a job assignment when he received a call that his cousin and good friend had passed away. As he was thinking about that, he was overcome with loneliness and depression. And he went and he opened a dresser drawer there in Taiwan, and he found the Bible that the Gideons had placed there. And Tim, he took that Bible out and began to read it. He said as he was reading in that Bible, he felt the joy and comfort of the Holy Spirit come into his life like he never experienced before. And Tim said he hopes when he gets to heaven, he can thank the person that was responsible for getting there, that Bible there in that hotel room. And when people thank the Gideons, they're thanking everyone that contributes to the ministry. They're thanking everyone that prays and makes financial contributions. As I said earlier, the Gideons distribute Bibles in prisons to our prisoners. I'd like to tell you about Dutch Bradley, who was a testimony speaker at one of our banquets. Dutch was originally from the Williamsport area. But he told us that night how at one time he was a drug courier from New York City to Atlanta, and how his buddies would wrap the drugs around their legs so they wouldn't get caught. But he did get caught, and he was in prison in Texas, which happened to be the third time that he was in prison. He called home to his mother in Williamsport, and he said, "Mom, I'm back in prison again." And she said, "Son, I'm so sorry." She said, "I'll keep praying for you." But Dutch wasn't optimistic that would do anything, because he heard that many times before. But there was a little old man came down the halls of that prison one day, and that little old man was a Gideon. And he really didn't feel like going to the prison that day and distributed Bibles, but his wife said, "You need to go." She said, there's someone there that needs a Bible. And Dutch's mom was praying. And as this Gideon looked into the prison cell and he saw Dutch there, he said, "Young man, you just look so discouraged." And as he slid the Bible through the bars of that prison gate, he said, "This will help, and I'll be praying for you." And that broke Dutch's hard heart. And for the first time in his life, he had a desire to open and read a Bible. And as he was reading in the Bible, he read that how because of Jesus, he could become a new creation, how old things could be passed away and everything could become new. And Dutch, he became a new creation. Today, he has a prison ministry going around and speaking in the prisons, telling the prisoners, "Please don't be stubborn like I was. If you have the opportunity to get a Bible, take it and read it." Well, he also goes around and gives his testimony as he was there at our banquet that night. And his message was, please don't quit doing what you're doing. He said if it wasn't for that Gideon giving him that Bible and praying for him, he'd still be in prison because he was sentenced to 37 years. But he said even if he would have got out, he said with the lifestyle that he had back then, he'd probably be dead by now. So with your support, us working together, we can continue to place Bibles in people's hands that could change your life. I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to share here in your worship service this morning. Thank you, Pastor, for giving me some of your time to share about the Gideons. And I'd like to thank this church for being a supportive church of the Gideon ministry. And may God bless each one of you real good.